Uh, One of the best things for me about Flashpoint is the chance to meet some people and have legitimate reasons to get to know them. And among the people that I met early on in Flashpoint is Steve Chamberlain. Mutual friends introduced us, and I didn't know what to expect. There are some people. It's surprisingly difficult to for someone to explain to you when you meet somebody what they're like. I mean, some people you say, well, this guy was like, he was like the CEO of X, and you meet them, and that didn't really describe who they were, but at least you had an image in your head. And so people tried to describe to me what I might discover when I met you, Steve, and I would say I had no clue. And it was great, but then to find out who you actually are, I'm not even sure you could ever have a clue, but just super impressed by Steve. There's something very special to me about Steve, and the fact that you're willing to come and share yourself with our teams in each batch. And Steve's also invested in teams in the batch, and I think that's been somewhat successful for you as well. Anyway, I don't want to take away, but and I also am having trouble speaking, so I'm going to pause myself and say, please welcome Steve Chamberlain, who I'm certain will share with you a little bit of his background, and maybe you'll be as in awe as I am of it. And then I suspect you'll want to ask him questions, and if it's okay with you, after you share a little bit about yourself, we'll just open it up and have questions. And
okay. My pleasure.
Anyway, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Steve Chamberlain.
Thank you. You know, I feel really strongly about programs like this. I mean,
there are no programs like this.
In fact,
there's every other program.
he's saying so many nice things about me. Have you ever seen this guy's resume? I mean, my gosh, I have a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Florida, and that's it. But I got a lot of experience through the years, and I'm going to take you through some of that. I think it's important that I kind of tell you a story of my life, and it gives it context as to how all of this happened. But I have made 26 investments over the last 18 years. I've had 5 wonderful exits, starting with WebMD. I've been through 14 bankruptcies, not personally, but I have invested in 14 companies that are no longer here. So I have the tire tracks across my back to prove that. I had 2 companies that at least I got my money back, and I have 7 that are active today. And as you might imagine, I'm pretty particular these days about what I'm going to invest in, and there's reasons for that. I mean, if you've been through what I've been through, I'm kind of really narrow in really what I want to do. And but I feel blessed to be able to do what I do for a living, and very fortunate. So let me kind of take you through my life very, very quickly. I'm from South Florida originally. My father was a heart surgeon, and he was very disappointed that I didn't follow in his footsteps. And so I went to the University of Florida, got a degree in journalism, and really didn't know what I was going to do. But my older sister lived in New Orleans, and I left for New Orleans and became a bartender after I left college. And my parents didn't think much of that. So I was there for about a year. I had a great time, but at the same time, I became a speechwriter for a state senator who was running for the mayor of New Orleans. And it was through that experience, being around him so much, that
All these years, I never knew that.
yeah, Nat Keefer. And I was constantly around television reporters, and I thought, you know, that's a really interesting job. I mean, to me, I thought, you know, if I could do that, that's something fast-paced and different, and, you know. So anyway, I thought I'd be able to get a job in a big market, but that didn't happen. And so I ended up at this tiny little tin can station in Biloxi, Mississippi, made famous by being wiped out by Hurricane Katrina. But in these small markets, this is an ABC affiliate station, there was only like 6 or 7 of us that were the reporters and on the air. And so when you're in a small market like that, you're working every day, and you're going on the air whether or not you like it. So anyway, I'll tell you a few funny stories. We had a sportscaster who was an alcoholic. He was an older gentleman, and he'd get drunk all the time. And so the news director would say, "Hey, Steve, go do the sports tonight." You know, just funny things in small markets that happen like that. But I was there about 6 months, and we didn't have cell phones. But we're talking about 1977. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have anything. You know, so if they're going to get in contact with you, it was through the landline at your house. And so I got a call about 4 o'clock in the morning, and the news director says, Steve, get to the station right now. There's going to be a riot in Pascagoula, the shipyards in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And so I went to the station, all the crew and me, and we went out. So sure enough, there's about 400 people standing at these gates, giant gates to this huge shipbuilding facility. And of course, they're all waiting for all the TV stations from the southeast to get there because they want to make a big thing out of this. So sure enough, the sunrise comes up and they start to open the gates. And what you're seeing here is these people known as scabs that are going to break the Union lines. And so the cameras are rolling, and I thought I was going to get killed because guns and baseball bats and all I could do is keep dropping the F-bomb because I was so frightened, you know. And so we get back to the station, and the news director's all excited because I'm going to lead the news that night and all that, and he puts the tape in, and it's, oh, Steve. Oh my God. I mean, that was, I just said, look, I'm so sorry. But honestly, I'm frightened for my life. I thought I was going to get killed. He goes, well, don't do that again. Please don't do that. And so these are the lessons that you learn in small market television before you move on to the big scene. You can't make mistakes like that when you're working for big stations. But it's kind of funny in retrospect to remember that. So anyway, I was only there about a year, and I got picked up by a much larger station in South Florida, and you know, you got the helicopter, and then you got all the other stuff. And so I can tell you this, being a reporter every day, even at a young age back then, it is exhausting. The people that do the news here in Atlanta, the anchors, they don't do anything. I'm just telling you. They're readers, they're looking at a teleprompter, and the weather people, they don't do anything. It's the people that are...
They spend a lot of time in their hair.
Right. It's the reporters that are out there in the natural elements doing this, and they're the ones under the pressure and all of that. And so I was one of 3 reporters that we had that did all the heavy, hard news, the murder, the plane crashes, and you know, in South Florida is a very active news market. Trust me. I mean, I've seen it all, and I think it's like being in a war zone. Sometimes you just see so much death and destruction and all of that. And it was also an interesting place to do the news because so many wealthy people lived there. And I remember one day the Kennedy family, the old lady, Rose Kennedy, President Kennedy's mother, she was very involved in the Special Olympics. And so they invited me over to do the story that night about her daughter, and she had a granddaughter that was affected by this. And here I am with the President of the United States, you know, but his mother, you know, and looking at all the Kennedy family and all this. And so I did a really nice piece that night. I'm walking out of the newsroom. It was about 6:30, and the news director says, you better take this call, Steve. And it was Senator Kennedy. And he was just calling me to say, look, my mother and I and everybody's watching tonight, Steve, and we just thank you on behalf of the Kennedy family for saying something so nice about what we're trying to do. It's things like that that keep you going, you know. And so anyway, I was doing a 5-part series on police corruption in South Florida, and I'm going somewhere with this story, by the way. And we were getting ready to go on the air, and it was about 5:55, and it's a big deal because this is a very controversial thing to report on, and you got to be very careful in how you say these things. Everything's alleged or whatever because nobody's been arrested or anything. But anyway, the owner of the station walks into the newsroom at 5:55 and looks at me and looks at the news director and says, we're killing this story. We don't need this kind of trouble around here. And it was at that point I'd had it. I was so tired. And I remember getting in my car that night and driving home, and I said, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be Mr. Dreyfus someday. I want to be the owner someday. And that light, I don't know, I'm sure everybody can share stories about when lights go on in your life. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And that was for me that I realized for the first time that I was a capitalist and that I wasn't chasing Edward R. Murrow anymore. So, it took me a while to get out of it, but I ended up joining a big real estate company in South Florida called Arvida. They owned big hotels in Sarasota, big developments in Miami, Jacksonville, the Panhandle, and they made me manager of advertising and public relations. And so that was my segue from the news business into business. And I was only there for 2 years, and I get this unbelievable offer to come here to Atlanta. and worked for the company called the Landmarks Group, director of marketing. And these are the people that built the King and the Queen building out on the perimeter. So I was there about a year and a half, and I was staring at 4 white walls and the secretary, and I was miserable, making all this money, and gave me a car and all these things that I'd never had being a journalist, you know. And I can only tell you this, it was kind of like being in an arranged marriage. You know, you've married the king's daughter, she's beautiful, and you got all the money in the world. There's just one thing, you don't love her, and you're in love with the girl that in the trailer park down the street. You know, and I just know this for a fact, the heart won't lie, you know. And so, long story short, I took a 50% cut in pay to go work for Ted Turner. And I never looked back. And I was one of the first salespeople that we had. Cable television kind of works like a newspaper. Half the money is made in subscriptions, and the other half of it's made in advertising. And so there were literally hundreds, if not thousands, of cable operators around the country that were carrying Superstation TBS at the time and CNN and Headline News. And so it was my job and about 25 other people to secure the contracts for the carriage of our networks. And so Ted Turner was, well, if you read about him, I mean, I don't know that I can add any color to it. I can tell you this. The first time I met him, the first day on the job, I didn't even know, you know, what my job title, I didn't even know anything. But I was at the top of the Hilton in Las Vegas. We were having a major convention, and our company, Turner, was not doing well. And we needed a big rate increase from a big cable operator. And so I got to the suite early. I'm by myself, and the knock comes on the door, and it's him. Bigger than life. First time I'd ever laid eyes on him. He screamed at me. He said, "Who are you?" And I'm kind of trembling at this point because I don't know, you know. And my boss is in there, and he sits down with me, and I had this paperwork. I don't even know what I'm looking at. You right? So he keeps screaming at me. Why in the hell did I hire you? I mean, and so this. Anyway, thank God. 10 minutes later, my boss walks in, and we can get over this. But in this particular meeting, it wasn't going well. And Ted Turner took off his jacket and laid down on the floor on his back and started pretending to stab himself. And he was saying to this guy, the big cable operator, "You're killing me, you're killing our company, killing me, we're never gonna..." And the guy just started laughing and said, "Ted, get off the floor, we're gonna give you what you want," you know. But it was that kind of charisma, you know, and working for this guy, he was nuts, you know, but he single-handedly, and I tell him this today, you know, he gives credit to a lot of people, but without him, there was no Turner Broadcasting. He was bigger than life, you know, and in recent years, I've seen him, and I actually had to be the chaperone of his children one summer, and that was no fun at all. But, you know, and then, long story short, in 1986, Turner bought MGM, and with that came 5,000 motion pictures and Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, and all of that. So he put me in charge of the distribution of those movies around the world, and back then on VHS, and later on would become DVD. And I had no right to be in a job like that, but he didn't care, and he trusted me, and he trusted a lot of young people, and he did know that we'd learn it, and we would not steal from him. And that's really how close it was back then. I mean, today it's a gigantic, I don't know what you call it, but it was very personal back then. And I think being around him and having all of those experiences, he put the wrestling company underneath me. These crazy wrestlers come in my office all the time. I mean, it's nuts. But you can't write a movie that can comprehend all the things that happened back then. But very grateful for him. And as I went on in life, I always told him, I said, you know, I've worked for some famous people, but nobody as big as you, you know. And so I still believe that about him. But anyway, it was very troubling for me in 1993 because the president of the company was fired, and I was right underneath him. And all hell breaks loose when this happens in a big company. And so they make me fire 100 people in my last year, and it's very, very disheartening. And so I ended up leaving the company on my terms. Ted Turner was wonderful to me, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I took it, the reason I'm telling you this is because I took it very personally. I mean, in some way I thought I had failed, you know, and I was really down on myself about this whole thing because I'd hired all these people. And so anyway, I have a real good friend that's an attorney at Capitol Records, and he invited me to come out in Los Angeles. I've never been in the record business before, but I ended up going to work for Frank Sinatra, and he was doing this career album called Duets, and Duets 1 and 2. And so here I am back into the thick of it, working with a famous person, and I was comfortable with it because I'd done so many movies before and dealt with a lot of famous people. And so that lasted for a year, and then the biggest thing I think that ever happened to me is that the Beatles had hired me to quarterback their life story, which is a Beatles anthology. And they were very interested in my background of taking classic motion pictures, gone with and reinventing them for a current and contemporary audience. And so this was their life's work, which was the 3 double albums, 2 brand new singles, a 10-hour home video series, and a 6-hour special on ABC. And that was the story of my life. I mean, being with them for 2 years, and I remember just before I was hired, it was a big process going through it, but they asked me what I wanted, you know, in terms of how much money I wanted. So I threw out a number, more money than I'd ever made. And they went, okay. I went, shit. I mean, you know, I could have gotten, that's the last time I'm doing that. But again, that was my privilege. And I think that you could have put their work in a brown paper bag and it would have done as well as it did. You know, we did $350 million in sales. It was the largest, even to this day, the largest music compilation in history. And the important part of that is 95 to 97, you could not do that today. It's not the way people purchase music. They cherry pick. They want what they want. You can't sell 3 double albums like that. It just doesn't. It wouldn't work. And so after that, I ended up becoming president of a small animation studio at Orion Pictures, and I was there. They signed me to a wonderful 3-year contract, and I was only there for 3 months, and the CEO called me and he said, I got good news and bad news, Steve. And I said, what's that? He said, our company was purchased last night and you're out. And I said, well, what's the good news? He says, you got a 3-year contract. They got to pay you out. And I said, all right, so we'll take that. And so that would explain me coming back to Atlanta in 1998. And I met this young kid, Jeff Arnold at the time, and he was the wonderkin and founder of WebMD. And I met him a couple of times through Burt Ellis, and I was fascinated by Jeff because he's a plate spinner. I've never seen anybody talk like this, and he's just like magnificent. I don't even think he knows what he's saying, but he gets those plates going, and he can just mesmerize you. And I remember going to some of these investment seminars where the bankers were thinking about investing in WebMD, and I'd sit in the back, and they were just all over this. And so Jeff would never return my phone calls. I was anxious to try to do something for him. And so Burt Ellis told me to come to their annual Christmas party at the Fox Theater, and he said, Jeff's going to be here, and you and I are going to corner him, find out why he won't talk to you. So Jeff goes on. He says, you're a great guy, Steve. You're too old. You don't know anything about healthcare. You don't know anything about the internet. You don't know blah, blah, blah. You know. And I saw this train leaving the station. And I did the only thing I could do. I said, Jeff, I'll give you $1 million to go work for WebMD. Back then, $1 million was a lot of money. But back today, it's like, oh, this guy's got 10 billion. This guy, but back then, it even shocked him. You know, because are you kidding me? And I said, yeah, you have it on Monday. So Jeff's like, okay, I'll take 200 of it, but you're vice president of something. You report to Reggie. I'm going to pay you 75 grand a year, and we'll see you on Monday. And that's really what happened. And that's how this story really did start. And a year and a half later, I made the investment. I think the market capitalization of WebMD at the time was about $200 million. A year and a half later, we were over $20 billion, had acquired 56 companies. We're bigger than Delta Airlines. So it's one of these stories about being in the right place at the right time, seeing something flicker and chasing it. And that's what I did. And I didn't come from the kind of money that it takes to be as an individual to do this. And that provided me at least the wherewithal to do it. I've been asked 100 times, Steve, why don't you join a fund? Why don't you start your own fund? Why don't you? And you know what? after all these years, I just prefer to do it on my own, because when I fail, it's a lot easier to yell at myself versus having to go explain it to a bunch of investors. And so after that, we were just writing checks like candy. And of course, all of those things tanked. eTour, you know, IXL, you name it. I mean, just really, really. And it was humiliating to me, because I thought I was smart. I thought I was, you know, I could do this over and over again. And the reality of it is, it doesn't really happen that way. And so, like I said, I've been fortunate to have a couple of great ones. You know, N2 Broadband was another great one for me. Vitru, which is one of the biggest exits in Atlanta. You know, Reggie Bradford, the founder, who deserves 100% of the credit. I was with him from the very beginning on this deal, but he was down on his hands and knees, really crying. And I mean, this is very emotional stuff, because we weren't going to make it. And yet, you see what happened, you know. And so, I'll take you through a couple of the deals that I'm in now, you know, that I feel very good about. Springbot is one of the ones that actually came out of ATDC, Brooks Robinson. And yeah, that's right. And right. Mm-hmm. And so I was one of the very early investors. There's 3 investors in this thing, and I was intrigued by Brooks, and I was intrigued by this idea that the small and the medium-sized players in e-commerce can't compete against Amazon. I mean, you guys buy something from Amazon tonight, a grill or something, they're going to come back to you in 5 minutes and say, would you like some tongs with that? Or, you know, this is semantic matching and all that. And the little guy just has no way to compete. So this is a marketing dashboard that they have. And it's for a little guy that says, okay, I'm going to spend $3,000 on an email marketing campaign. You know, so they do it. This dashboard that they have at Spring tells you whether that action produced anything or not. So you're not flying blind anymore. So I think that the company's going to do very well. We are doing well. I think we stayed true to our roots, to stay and not drift off into medium or large companies. We've stayed right in the middle of the small guy. And for that reason, I think we're going to be successful. Stay true, you know, to that. Insight Pool is where I have the largest position. This is Devin Widgesinker here out of Atlanta, and again, this is social media marketing software, and this is helping big brands find influencers on social, primarily right now Twitter, but moving into Facebook and others. And you know, when I was growing up, we had one TV in my house. You had rabbit ears on it. You had 3 choices, right? ABC, NBC, CBS. And then along comes Turner in 1978, and today you go home with your cable, you've got hundreds of choices, right? So imagine if I gave each of you a fragile glass globe tonight, gave you some sunglasses and some gloves, and I gave you a hammer. I said, go ahead and hit that thing. And you did. That thing is going to shatter into thousands of pieces. And this is what has happened in my lifetime. I've gone from 3 choices to a couple hundred to now thousands. And this is what I think is so interesting about what you guys are doing. And I find similarities in it, that we're trying to make sense of all that shattered glass. And that's kind of where my mind has been going over the last couple of years. I've just used that metaphor because it seems to resonate with people when I say it. I got involved in a pizza chain. I don't know anything about pizza or fast food, but the head guy did Moe's, and I just happen to like him a lot. And we've had our trials and tribulations, but we now have sold over 200 restaurants in 17 states. Being an investor in something like that is kind of funny. You know, it's in the large cities like Atlanta, we don't do that great. But when we go into these small, you know, college towns and stuff, it just goes off the chart. And about 3 or 4 months ago, I went to one of our locations here in Atlanta and walked in with my wife and child, and the guy that was making the pizza looked like he was a heroin addict, you know. And I just, you know, we got the good news here is that the food's always good, but sat down at the table and the trash was all over the floor. My wife is just looking at me because I know what she's thinking. And she finally blurts it out, what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I'm going to send an email in about 5 minutes, which I did to the CEO, and you know, they got over there and all that. But these are things that I learn along the way, but I invest sometimes with people who've done it before. You know, I would never try to do something like that on my own. I don't know anything about it. Honestly, don't want to know that much about it, but we've had a success story. We had the original founders of Five Guys come in and recapitalize us about 6 months ago, and so I sold half my interest, and I still have a trailing interest. But it's nice to have a big player now backing us, and we see the road to making something like this happen. So I don't want to sit up here too long, but I do want to tell you just a few things I off the top of my head of how to speak to somebody like me. I'm extremely sensitive to what younger people in particular are saying to me when they want me to invest in something. And I will tell you some things to never, ever say to me, because I have lived this over and over again. And I think we talked about it a lot. A lot of this is psychology, is really what it is. And don't ever say to me, Steve, that'll never happen. Really? That'll never happen. Well, it's probably already happening. You just don't know it. And I've got the bruises on my back and to prove it. You know, and things like, we're going to do this. I just can't tell you when. Now you're talking to me about poor work ethic. Now you're giving me doubt. I've even had one young guy say, listen, I want you to invest in this, but you got to understand that every summer my family leaves for 5 weeks to go up to this lake. No, we're not doing this. So I have just heard these stories over and over and over again, and like I said, I'm very sensitive to what people are saying to me, because I know the reality of it. And so when I look at these things, I'm always looking at what's your background? You know, I'm always interested in listening to somebody. What have you done in your life? And I realize a lot of people are young. Okay, so I'm not asking you to tell me you won the Nobel Prize or whatever. I'm just looking for some pattern of success in your life that has shown me that you were the valedictorian. I don't know. You won a race. You did something of achievement that I'm looking for leadership. I'm looking for some pattern of success in any way. But if you're just sitting there telling me, well, I haven't done anything yet, but I'm going to. No, I'm not. That's not the story. You know, I've said this before. I remember at the very beginning of Flashpoint, there was a large, this room in fact, and there was a guy up on the stage up here, and he was preparing to talk about how to frame his story of a company that would provide software for social media. And this guy is going around and around and around, like 15 minutes. And I'm sitting in the back with some other guys, and so I raised my hand, and Merrick says, well, it's about time, Steve. And I said, well, listen, I'm going to come up here, and I don't want to embarrass you, but I'm going to tell you a story. I said, you know, the first 5 people in the rows right here, they are your peers. And that's great, because they're wonderful people. But you know what? They don't have a nickel between themselves. So you really are forced to talk to somebody like me in the back, because we're the ones that would consider funding something like this. And I said, you've already confused me. I have no idea what you're talking about. So I walked up there and I said, what's your name again? And then, so you're in the social media software space? Okay. I said, here's your first slide. And I took this magic marker out and I put a big 0 with a dollar sign. And I said, you know what that is? And he's staring at me, perplexed. And I said, that's the amount of money that the top 100 brands in the world spent on social media in the year 2007. I said, here's your second slide. 6 billion. That's the amount of money that the top 100 brands are going to spend on social media in the year 2014. Now, why don't you tell me how your company is going to go get a piece of this phenomenon? And let me tell you this. That money is not coming out of nowhere. It's being redirected. In other words, the Coca-Cola company has X amount of dollars to spend in marketing. They happen to be spending it in advertising, promotion, whatever they're doing, but they're going to take it from somewhere and put it over here. So this is not new money. But tell me and tell everybody else how you're going to go get it. And that's how you speak to somebody like me. Don't make me guess. I'm guessing. I have no idea what you're talking about. But sometimes the hardest thing to do, and you alluded to having a theatrical person come in and teach you. The hardest thing to do is like writing a country song. You got to get this, get the bridge down. You just have to make something so complicated, so dead simple that anybody can understand. In fact, the older people, they don't understand this, really. They'll sit there and tell you they do, but they don't. And as I deal with older investors myself, that's the thing I do. I try to dumb this thing down. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. And with the money that you're giving us, this is what we intend to have happen. So I'm always looking for the unique proposition in something. I know that we're not going to compete against IBM, but where's that hole? Where's that tiny little hole in the wall? Tell me about that. And what research have you done to tell me? I'm really interested in the research, the background. How have you discovered this little hole, and what are you going to do about it? And that to me is very impressive when people take the time to understand the industry, what's already out there, and where this little hole is going to be filled. With somebody like me, I really honestly have to be personally interested in the subject matter to do it. I don't do these throw just money at it and go away anymore. I don't do that. I tend to want to get involved, especially in the early stages. It's one thing to write the check, but I'm usually on the board early on, not later on, but early on, or the board of advisors. And somebody like me, I really understand what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And I'm not trying to impress anybody at my age. I'm not going to tell you I know something when I don't know it. I'm pretty good at raising the capital, and I'm pretty good at helping shape the vision of the company and the message proposition, and usually in sales, and that's it. I don't get involved in the legal or the financial aspects or anything else, and that's typically what I enjoy doing. But again, it's fairly narrow to me these days as to what. But I will say this: I read constantly, and it's in the reading I discover the patterns of what's getting funded and what's coming next. And for me, that's how I live my life, and that's where I discover I want to go in this direction, or at least I want to find out more about it. So I just immerse myself in 3 newspapers a day, just constantly trying to educate myself, because I become very irrelevant at my age. It's a fact, So I've done this a couple of times before, but this is a business to me. And I don't, unless it's a friend and I believe in some charitable thing, I'm not kidding around with this stuff. And for many people, like I said before about the emotional aspect, people become emotional about this, particularly founders and stuff. And when you find them early on saying, we would never do that, what do you mean we would never do that? You're talking about taking millions of dollars of other people's money, and you're going to tell them what we're going to do? That's not what we're going to do. We're going to operate in the best interest of every single placeholder. You, the shareholders, and this whole thing. And I can honestly tell you, the people that I have really been successful with, I wish it was different. Obviously, luck and timing are one thing, but the guys that I've really made the money with, they're all killers. And I don't mean that as somebody's got a gun, they're going to shoot down. They have this little antenna at the top of their head, and for some reason, they know how to build it up, spin it, and get the hell out. And this is something that you cannot teach. I've seen it. I've worked with some of the brightest people in the world, and they didn't make it because they had this idea, oh, we're just going to be fine 5 years. That's not how this works. This is not how technology works. It morphs, spins, mutates every second. And this is why when I see somebody emotionally attached, we're building this for the future. No, that's not what we're doing. That's not what I'm doing. It's not a joke, and I have been taught that over and over and over again. And so I'm always interested in asking these folks that are asking me for my money, what's your exit strategy? And if I'm going to make an investment, I want to know exactly what you are going to do with the money and what can I expect, because I know you're going to raise more money down the road, but what milestones are you going to achieve so I understand where this thing is, because obviously you're going to be coming back for more money. But I want a very clear understanding of that. I've been involved in deals where people have done the unimaginable. I mean, these are things, you know, these to me are nothing but stock plays. That's all this is. And you got people taking $400,000 salaries, crap. I mean, just unimaginable. You do not do these things in something like this. But I have had to go through this, and, you know, when I'm not on the board, and I have to hear it from somebody else, and it's upsetting because that's not the game I'm playing. So finally, I guess we all know about work ethic. It's the number one thing. It's just, that's what it is. And I'll go to the mat for these folks that work so hard. And it's about work ethic. And I think it's also sad to say it's about intuition. You know, how many times I could ask each of you, I could sit with you. We've all done it, right? You're given that blink, you know, that thing blinking at the back of your head saying, I don't know about this, whether it's your personal life or whatever. And you go ahead and do it anyway. And I can tell you, half the failures that I've had, that thing's been going off. I just ignored it and did it. And sure enough, it happened. So that's, you know, that's kind of what I've learned, to trust my intuition and in an inexact science, which is what this is. So there you have it. I think that I'm the portrait of a risk taker. I'm not a gambler. I go to Las Vegas every once in a while, and I'll get $400 out of and that's it. It's entertainment to me. I'm going to lose it, but I don't sit there and do that. I'm a risk taker, not a gambler. And hopefully, I'm not great at what I do. I don't even know if I'm good at what I do, but I'm getting better at it, I think, as we go along. So it's been my privilege to be here tonight. Thank you for having me, and I hope...
Thank you, Steve. So you're not going to go yet, right? Okay. It's interesting. I've heard parts of that story, those stories. And I don't know if they get clearer to you, they get clearer to me, and it's really special to be able to share most of that. It's what you come to realize in these things is when people they make a construct, or whether they're actually sharing with you what the experience of it was. I think what you just heard was the experience of it, which is what makes it meaningful. So maybe some questions. People have some questions. Gamal?
So I've heard this WebMD story before, but didn't know who it was from. Almost sounded like an urban myth. It was like a crazy story to me. So you're the myth. And so I wanted to know what made you so interested, or what about WebMD or the founder made you so interested to make a product?
Gamal was asking what about WebMD or the founder made you so interested?
I think it was no pun intended, it was a flash of light, you know, when I met him the first time. He was so young, but he was so well-spoken. I'd never seen anybody that young doing that. And I think I told you, I went to a series of Drexel Burnham, these investment banking seminars where he was the keynote speaker. And I just sat in the back of the room taking it all in, and I would stay after and just listen to the reaction from the people he was pitching. And it was just very clear to me that I saw this train leaving the station. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I have to find a way to get on that train. And I just, I never looked back. I never had a doubt, not one single doubt. And I just didn't. And I was telling Merrick, you know, I've had this experience, you know, 2 or 3 times in life, but they don't come around often. You know, I wish they did. You know, but you see it just so clear. You know, I have terrible eyesight. It's like going to the eye doctor. You put that thing in front of you're getting a little clearer now, getting a little clearer. Well, you see one like that, it's just eagle eyes. You know, I see it. And it took somebody like Jeff Arnold to tell the world, we're doing it. You know, and he had no doubt, he had no fear. In fact, I went to Congress with him one time. He's talking to Congress. He's telling all these, you know, famous politicians that this is the future and we're the #1 healthcare internet technology in the world. I'm thinking, really? You know, but it would take that bravado to do it. And he was a master at it, and the press followed us, and before you know something in life, perception is reality. Doesn't matter whether it's true or not. He would get off stage, and how did I do, Steve? And I said, I don't know what to say. It sounded great. I don't know if you know what you're saying, but it sounded great. But there wasn't anybody in the audience to say that's not true, right? Because there's no history to it. It's kind of what everyone here is doing, right? There's no history to it, so who's going to say, well, that you'll never make it? That's the beauty of this technology thing, you know, what you're doing here and building businesses that didn't exist before. I think the genius of Steve Jobs was he was inventing things you didn't know you needed, you know? But these guys that know how to tell these stories like Jeff, they're phenomenons. He's still doing it. So,
More questions. Matt?
So I was interested, you said that you would like to invest in things that you're personally interested in. You have a sort of deep background in media, in film, and in music, and it doesn't sound like you've done a lot of investing in those areas.
I have one large investment in it, NDN here in Atlanta, which is News Distribution Network, which is right down that alley. You know, I'm watching this consolidation happen right now, and I'd be hard-pressed to do another one right now with all of this noise out there, and you're seeing these acquisitions happen, and I think that business is being rolled up somewhat. If you're not already in it right now, I think it could be over for a while. You know, I do want to say something to you. Through all this failure and humiliation that I have had over the years, you know, I kind of learned how to process it a long time ago because it was really bothering me. And I made the decision to do what I did based upon the facts that I had at the time I did it. Now, the fact that everything changed 3 or 4 years later, I could not predict. And I have been asked many times what keeps me up at night. And I said, well, it's always the same thing. I don't care what deal I'm in. It's 2 kids in a garage in Palo Alto figuring out what we do, quicker, cheaper, faster, whatever, you know. You know, you will never see me say, I guarantee you we're doing this. That's ridiculous in anything related to this.
Dion?
You mentioned reading the newspaper, kind of keeping up with what industry. So what industries are you interested in now?
Well, I'm fascinated by the security thing. You know, I wish I'd have gotten involved in that one. You know, I'm still looking in and around that area right now. I'm still interested in these companies like Insight Pool that are using this kind of semantic technology to make sense out of billions of bytes of information every day. That area, artificial intelligence, is of interest to me. But this thing about security is so dynamic. I have an investment in a medical company. I know that I'm with Reggie Bradford on that, Mana Health out of New York, and patient records. And I know that this is such a big area, and there's thousands of companies chasing it. And before I wrote the check to do it, all the guys sitting around the table, I said, I just want to say one thing, okay? Just one thing. I don't know anything about this. I know how big it is, but there's 2 companies in the United States that control 97% of the hospitals in this country. It's Cerner and Epic. Now you tell me why they're not in this business. And you could hear a pin drop. Now I said, I'll tell you why they're not in this business. They can't stand the liability. But it's happened, and it's happening. And you see Sony, and you see, going back to this security thing, I mean, as a society, I don't know that we're ever going to be protected. But I mean, I'm chasing that area because I think it's ripe for innovation. It makes people nervous. But
Frederick, you got a question?
You have cash up front to pursue your own company. Have you thought of where you could be if you launched your own company? Are you interested in that?
yeah, you know, like I said, I've been asked to do that many times, and I find it at this point, I never say never, you know, but I feel like I'd rather fail and blame myself than to have to come in and explain to a bunch of investors why I blew it.
Ken?
You mentioned there were quite a few deals that fell apart, I guess, in the late 90s probably. There seemed to be an over-allocation of capital then. There's some people speculating that that kind of same environment is occurring now, especially in the private sector. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this thing with these unicorns has gotten out of control, you know, and I think you'll see that's already being reflected in public companies coming down, way down. And the numbers don't match. There were no numbers back in 1999 and 2000. You're just chasing a theory and whatever. And I don't believe that today. You know, most of my companies, you know, I have a great window into the reality of it, the recurring monthly revenues, what our expenses are. So there's much more discipline being prepared here. You know, I heard something really interesting the other day. You know, there was like $4.5 trillion that vanished from our economy in 2001 because of this. And you never really heard that much about it. And you know why? Because the people who were putting the money up had the wherewithal to do it in the first place. It wasn't like the housing crash in 2007, where now you're talking about the middle class. It's a whole other thing. And I found that of interest. But I'm sure nothing surprises me now, you know, and when I deal with some of the young people I deal with, and I'm sort of like the grandfather in this. I've just seen so much. I go, just relax, will you, for a second. This is not the end of the world. But I fully anticipate and expect, we always talk about it, terror and euphoria every day, all right? I got it. You know, that's why we're here. We have a chance. I'm not saying it's 100%, but, you know, I've been in the battle, you know. I've been shot at and shot, chased around, and I'm still here, and I feel like I still want to do it. I still want to chase it, you know.
Piyush?
Steve, sounds like you have a good intuition-based flash of light philosophy to invest. So my question is, what do you like or not like about the Flashpoint philosophy? And how is it different from...
I think this is fantastic because we never had this when I was starting out, you know, where it's a process where somebody like Merrick is taking you through the reality of this stuff. And the reality of it is, and so many people, and God bless them, have the greatest idea in the world. But you don't know whether anybody's willing to pay for it. And you don't know if they're willing to pay for it on a recurring basis. And it's so fundamentally important. I mean, it's very important for everybody to write these business plans and all this. I've never read one. And I've read 1,000 of them. I don't even read them anymore. It's just entertaining to me. It's a comic book. Because it just doesn't work like that. But you do have to do it. And it's important for you to stick to you got to have it. And like I said, I never saw one that did that. But I think I like this process because one way or the other, you're going to find out. You know, and if you don't, it's important to find out early. Drag everybody around in this, you know. It reveals itself, I believe, in this program.
Is there something you don't like about Flashpoint?
No, I mean, I just feel, you know, I'm here, you know. I feel like, you know, it's important for me. People like me to come in and kind of tell it like it is. You know, I'm not going to come up here and say that I'm the biggest winner of all time and aren't I great? And, you know, it doesn't work like that. But I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I'm still here. I'm glad I'm still enthusiastic about it.
Us too. Michael, you had a question?
Yes. Other than people not buying startups products, what do you think were some of the other, I guess, top 3 reasons why those companies, those 14 companies went bankrupt?
I think that, well, first of all, a couple of them were undercapitalized.
Did you repeat the question? I think.
Yeah,
He's talking about...
There were some failures. Is there a pattern to the failures?
Yeah, he's talking about the 14 failures. What are some of the things? I'd say that undercapitalized, and they didn't have the traction to induce the shareholders like me to keep going with it. What are some of the other... I've been in some stuff where the guys are just not particularly honest. They're not revealing, you know, exactly, you know, what's going on with the company, and And the refusal to pivot and do the things necessary to survive, that's another big one. Timing. There's still some great ideas and things that I backed. It was the wrong time. We were way ahead of ourselves.
Paul?
Steve, this is the third time I've heard you come to speak, so I want to thank you. Question, one of the first things I heard, first time I heard tonight was one of the characteristics you thought was the killer instinct, something that can't be taught. Can you give us a couple of examples in your experience, more than the one you shared, where we can learn some more about what that instinct is?
Well, I think these people that I've been fortunate to invest in, they're great storytellers. Not only are they great salespeople, but they have a way to begin to tell a company's story and to display a vision. And it's so fundamentally important to get the press behind you, picking up whether it's true or not. I don't care. The more you're out there, in the public eye, the more confidence that I wish this wasn't true, but it is. And you get this, it's a tractor that just starts rolling, and as I said before, perception is reality. And it's the magic behind what they do and what they know is this instinct that they have, that they know that time is not your friend, and they understand how to thread that needle and get out before it's like, I always say, it's like holding a bag of ice cream outside of Publix on a hot summer day. You better not stand there too long. And it's really true. It is absolutely true in technology.
James?
You said a couple of times, maybe when you left Turner, you experienced a lack of self-confidence, coming out of that situation. And with some of the investments you had made, you spoke about taking it personally. How did you rally, after those times, and figure out what it was about to keep going and do it again and stay? How did you?
I should have given you the microphone. The question is, faced with failure, how do you rally?
I think I have a series of personality characteristics. Yeah, I think I'm one of these people that's an optimist, but a realist. I think that, I said, I'm very blessed to be able to do this in the first place. And I think that I'm one of these people that I just want to keep going. It's very important for me to have a story to tell in life. I've done the big corporate stuff. I'm at the point in my life, I don't add any value to a big company. They don't need me. I mean, and I don't want to do it. So it's really, I still want to keep chasing this front edge of sorts. One of these guys that just wants to stay in the game. It's really important for me to engage young people and stay relevant. Really important to me. And that's why I keep doing it.
Kurt?
Can you talk to me a little bit about the risk profile of the pizza parlor to college town versus something like Insight?
I just got to give you some insight into this. So Kurt's conversation with me half the time is, well, we could do that, or we could open a pizza parlor in a college town. So you touched a nerve tonight.
When you're in the technology world, everybody's like, yeah, but this thing could be the next Instagram. I'm like, yeah, but that one sells pizza. So.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting today. Like I said, I didn't know that much about it, but I am very friendly with the owners and all that, and I go in often to see it. And they have this software in our corporate office. You turn on this software, and they can tell you by the millisecond what's going on at each cash register in each store throughout the country, and I find it fascinating. And I think what's happening in the pizza business, our value proposition is, this gluten-free dough if you want it, fresh vegetables, and the millennials and people like it, they want what they want, when they want it, how they want it. And this stuff going on with Pizza Hut and all of it, it's crap. It tastes terrible, and they're doing all these crusts, sriracha crust. I mean, it's awful. So I think, we're at kind of this, my wife is from a tiny little town called Valdosta. We're going to open one down there. Down there, Uncle Maria's is like going to the Ritz-Carlton. It's an event, and that's why I think these smaller towns, have access to this new age, eating, and it's just healthy and so on. But it was very interesting for me to see how the metro areas. There's a lot of competition in Atlanta. There's 1,000 pieces, but it's interesting to see these small Minot, South Dakota, Macon, Georgia, Tallahassee. I mean, just it's amazing. So the company, even though it's pizza, is pivoting because of this. We're not going to attack the metro areas. We're going to go where the market is, and we didn't know that until this happened.
But I'm interested from the point of view of the fact that, so I know some about Insight Pool, Insight Pool. So something like that is cutting edge, and the whole concept of insight and Twitter and being able to know where the market is going and all that kind of stuff. But it's not real yet because you can't really see it, feel it, taste it like a pizza place and stuff. So when you go into an investment on those kind of things, you see that as a risk profile that's different than something like Insight Pool or something?
This one was real plain and simple. I followed Matt Andrew. He had a big exit with Moe's. He was the president, and I liked him. And I was just up for doing something I'd never done before, and I'm kind of that. There's 9 investors that own it, and I'm kind of the spokesperson for the investor group because I have more time to spend on it than the rest of the guys do. But isn't it funny? I mean, my wife used to say, "Look at all these technology things. Watch you make a bunch of money with this stupid pizza." I mean, it's somebody had to start McDonald's. Somebody. You never know, right?
Maybe we have time for one more question.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been my
Steve,
pleasure.
it was great. Thank you so much.